looking like a big slice of cake. This is the Wrigley Building, named of course for the Wrigley Gum Company, close cousin to Wrigley Field up north in Wrigleyville. We love our chewing gum here. This was built in two parts in 1921 and 1924 in a style that is called Spanish Revivalism. See, in the 1920s, Chicago architects were big fans of everything that they were doing over in Europe. We were looking to Europe for our styles of beauty and design. The Wrigley Building is actually designed in the style of the old Spanish cathedrals and churches. That clock tower up there is actually modeled after the bell tower of the Cathedral of St. Mary of the Sea in Sevilla, Spain. The building itself, Wrigley Building, is also lined with 250,000 glazed white terracotta tiles. Terracotta is a Latin phrase meaning cooked earth. Essentially, it is a fireproof material that we plastered all of our buildings with in the wake of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Moving on to something completely different. This is not Spanish Revivalism. This is called contextualism. This is Trump International Hotel and Tower, one of our latest additions to the city, built in 2009. Second tallest in the city currently. Contextualism is the style. Contextualism is less about making a big splash, something like the Wrigley Building, which is very much its own thing. Contextualism is about drawing attention to the environment or the context that the building stands in. So you'll notice the flat face of the curtain wall here, the way it curves gracefully around the sides. What it's doing there is mimicking the bend of the Chicago River itself. Also, you'll notice the setbacks as the tower climbs ever higher. Each of those setbacks corresponds to a height of a neighboring building. The first setback is the same height as the roofline of the Wrigley Building. The second setback matches the top of the Mather Tower, that skinny building right there on your left. And the third setback matches the top of AMA Plaza, the big shiny black glass box building directly next door to it. This is what we call visual continuity in the architectural docent world. Just drawing your attention, albeit subtly, to the neighboring buildings, lifting the whole area up. Speaking of black glass box buildings, AMA Plaza, American Medical Association Plaza, formerly the IBM building, terrific example of what we call pure black box modernism, or sometimes the second Chicago Architectural School. Second Chicago School of Architecture, that's what it's called. Popularized by a man named Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, thought to be the father of the modernist movement. We'll get to him a little later. Directly next door, a fan favorite. This is Marina City, corncob-looking towers. Don't let it be forgotten that we are currently in the Midwest. Marina City is a wonderful exercise in social engineering as a form of architecture. Strike that, reverse it. Architecture as a form of social engineering. You see, Bertrand Goldberg, the architect for Marina City, realized in the 1960s that there was not a strong population base in the downtown Chicago area, unlike today. And so he decided to change that. So he built a self-contained pair of towers. Everything that the residents of Marina City need is only an elevator ride away. They have their parking garage, they have the marina for their boats, obviously. Inside the buildings are also retail and convenience stores, a grocery shop, a grocery store, a bowling alley, a barber shop, a swimming pool. Everything that the residents of Marina City need is right there in their building, which actually would have been really nice to have last year while I was in lockdown, because my building doesn't even have an in-building washer and dryer. So, but yeah, it's terrible. But Bertrand Goldberg, who said of architecture, for me what is important is clarifying the function. I don't care about the form of the building, how it looks. I care about what it is doing. I care about bringing people together. What was it he said? It's community. I'm interested in building communities, and that's something important to remember, I think. Coming up on our right, ladies and gentlemen, we have sort of one of our grandfather buildings here on the river, the beautiful red brick building, nice and long, it's a kind of remnant of the prairie style made famous by Frank Lloyd Wright, but I don't really think so that much. The Reed Murdoch Building is its name. Named for the Reed Murdoch Wholesale Grocers. The building was constructed in 1914, making it one of the older players on the Chicago River. What was so innovative about the Reed Murdoch Building when it was first constructed is that they chose to face the river. They decided that they would use the river not only as a commercial tool, but also as an aesthetic tool. This was actually part of something that Daniel Burnham, one of our most famous architects, the man who designed the campus for the Columbian Exposition, our World's Fair of 1893, also called the White City. Daniel Burnham had the idea in 1909 that in an effort to beautify the city, we should start doing more things to make the city enjoyable. And one of those things was making buildings use the river as an aesthetic device, use the river to attract people to the downtown area. And the Reed Murdoch building was one of the earliest buildings to say, you know what, yeah, Daniel Burnham might have something there, let's do it. Mostly, ladies and gentlemen, just as a side note, I will be talking mostly about buildings that will be on our right as we tour, so if you are curious about anything that's on the left, you're wondering why am I not talking about it, we will be coming back up the river, and I promise I will get to those buildings. Don't you worry. The same architect who designed the Reed Murdoch building also built this little guy right here, the Helene Curtis, this red brick building. The only reason I point it out is because it's a pretty good example of our earliest Chicago School of Architecture, called the First Chicago School. It's just base, shaft, capital. It's basically just meant to mimic an old classic Roman or Greek column. Louis Sullivan, one of our most famous architects at the time, said that all any building needed was to adhere to that idea. Base, shaft, capital. Every inch a proud and soaring thing. Speaking of proud and soaring, we have now my third favorite building in the city of Chicago. This is the Merchandise Mart, ladies and gentlemen, just called the Mart by us locals. This was built in 1930. Financed by the Marshall Field Company as a marketplace and a wholesale store. It is actually a wonderful example of the Art Deco style. Art Deco, which was made very popular in Chicago in the late 20s and very early 30s, before the Depression came along. The hallmarks of the Art Deco style are the black inset windows, flanked by the stone columns that draw your eye upwards naturally, streamlined verticality we call it. You'll also notice the setbacks at the top that help reduce the building's girth and depth. Basically, the architect, Alfred Shaw, wanted it to make it look like he had not just dropped a huge cinder block onto 2 blocks worth of space in Chicago. Merchandise Mart, which is still the largest privately held commercial building in the world, at 4.3 million square feet of playing space. Massive. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to what I like to refer to as the Hall of Mirrors. Just take a look around, get your selfies, you'll probably see yourself reflected in one of them. This is what is actually called Wolf Point. And despite all the futuristic looking buildings, this is where it all began, y'all. This is our cradle of civilization. Wolf Point was home to our first trading outpost, our first hotel, our first church, and most importantly, the 3 earliest taverns in Chicago's history, because God love us, we do love our cold ones here. Wolf Point is the point in the city where the Chicago River forks off. It bends into the north and the south branch and the main branch. So we really are kind of in the heart of everything, y'all. As you can see, we are looking more towards the future than the past, with all these beautiful, shiny buildings around us. Currently, what's going up on your right is the Salesforce Tower, coming in 2023. Yeah, in what is probably the clearest example of what President Calvin Coolidge called, of President Calvin Coolidge's dictum that the business of America is business. Let it not be forgotten. On your left, finally a building on our left, ladies and gentlemen, we have River Point, also sometimes referred to as the Hot Pocket Building. I don't know who calls it that, but apparently they do. River Point, built in 2017, the first office tower to be constructed downtown in the wake of the Great Recession of 2008, so there was a 7-year gap there. And River Point really made up for lost time using architecture, using engineering and design elements. So you'll notice those circles there with the fans spinning inside them. That's because the plaza in front of River Point is built over active railroad tracks. So there's trains running directly underneath the plaza there, some going down as low as 60 feet underground, and the fans are used to basically as coolant. They're exhaust ports so that the trains don't overheat all the way down there underground. When they were putting River Point up, they actually had to bend the steel columns inwards as they dug down so that they would not pierce any of the train tunnels. That parabola on the bottom is just a natural extension of the steel columns leaning up and going out. It also serves as their rain gutter, which is pretty cool. We're going up the north branch of the Chicago River now. We're gonna head up a little ways and then turn it around. First thing I want to point out is one of our old bridges here. This is the Carroll Street Bridge, has not been in use since 1999. It was originally built in 1908, but you can see the big concrete block there. This is the clearest example we have of how the Chicago bridges work. There's just under 40 bridges in the downtown area. What we use is a style called trunnion bascule bridges. If those of you here who do not speak French, all you really need to know is that it means teeter-totter. With those big concrete blocks, we pull the weight of the iron and steel bridges up so that barges and boats can get through. And then when they need to go back down, we just lower it back the other way. Trunnion bascule, ladies and gentlemen. We also have the Kinzie Street Bridge that we're passing under right now. The Kinzie Street Bridge, only reason I pointed out is because it's the site of one of my favorite Chicago stories, purely for the absurdity, the Great Chicago Flood of 1992. You see, in September of 91, the Great Lakes Dredge and Dock Company was replacing some of those pilings that you see there that help keep the bridge protected from boats. And they accidentally drove one of those wooden logs deep into the mud of the Chicago River, and they pierced a utility tunnel that had been laying dormant since the 1950s. These utility tunnels went all the way back to the start of the 20th century. They had been used as a delivery system for dozens of buildings in the downtown area, and unfortunately they had been not kept up by the city since the 1950s. And so much so to the point that they didn't even know that there was any kind of a leak happening in those tunnels until months later, and by that point it was far too late. The day before they were actually supposed to send someone down there to assess the damage of the leak, April 14th, 1992, my birthday, the day of that appointment that they set was the day after the floodgates had opened up. April 13th, in the early morning hours, that was when that little crack turned into a big flood and millions of gallons of water started to pour into those utility tunnels. What happened next? What happened next? I'll tell you after the break. We're going to be spinning around right now, as you can probably tell. Take a second to get some pictures if you like. Take a moment to use the bathroom.